Much mixed in Sudan.
Yeah.
The South, which is usually referred to as Christian, animist, African.
Can the two go together?
It is you people in the press that usually refer to us as such.
Yeah.
And the North, which is usually referred to as Arab Muslim North. This is not true. According to the census that was taken in 1956 by the British before they left.
Yeah.
According to that census, those who registered as ethnically Arab were about 31% of the population.
Yes.
And those who registered as African were 69% of the population.
Yeah.
There are actually more Africans in the north than in the south, contrary to what the press says. But that, of course, is not the issue. Our objective in the SPLM-SPLA is to establish a Sudan that belongs to all of us, whether we are of African or Arab origin. Nations are formed as a result of the historical movement of peoples. People move for whatever reasons they move, escaping religious persecution in search of economic opportunities, or just out of curiosity, what is behind the hill. And they find themselves in a new geographical space. They interact over time, divide up into its component parts. And hence, the issue of self-determination is one of the issues that we have been discussing in the NDA in 1995 and also here as well. So it is an ongoing. These are ongoing meetings of the NDA. We met in June in Asmara of this year. We met in Cairo. We met in Tripoli, and we are now meeting in Kampala.
Mr. Chairman, I will throw the floor open, for people to pose questions and take you on. In fact, if you're out there and you want to ask Colonel Garang any question, please call us on 348-406. We'll take your questions. But the people out there listening would like to bring you closer to home. I mean, how does your struggle has affected the stability of the country, in which you're speaking? We've had a civil war in the north. Now we have one in the west, which is closely linked with the Sudanese question. And what do you make of how does your solution address our own stability here?
Well, Africa's problems are, of course, much more than the SPLA or our regional problems. You have had problems here in Uganda going back to the days of Idi Amin or before. There was no SPLA then. At the present, the situation has been compounded by the existence of an Islamic fundamentalist regime in Khartoum that has an internationalist vision of Islam to export it beyond its borders. So they are sponsoring groups in Eritrea. They are sponsoring Islamist groups in Ethiopia. They have an Islamic Party of Kenya. And they are sponsoring several groups in Uganda. Sudan is a large country. It's the largest in Africa, 1 million square miles, bordering 9 countries. And so if there is peace and stability in the Sudan, definitely there will be peace and stability, more peace and stability in the region.
Neighboring countries. Let me just swing to Honorable Winnie here. Is the chairman just talking politics and diplomacy?
No, I think that from what he has just said, they have been engaged in a very protracted struggle for the people of Sudan, and in many ways I respect that struggle. But what I would like Kanu Garang to face up to here is that Uganda has been paying a very high price for that struggle in Sudan, and that SPLA, the movement that he leads, and the SPLM and SPLA, to my mind, don't seem to be able to get their act together. Our forces have been backing them up at great expense to our own, or at a great cost to our budget. I'm told that our forces often accompany them in battles right up to near Juba, and then when they retreat, the SPLA cannot hold ground. It's pushed back even sometimes up to Gulu. that they need this prop of the Ugandan army, and we have to pay for that cost. And not only that, now the whole of Acholi land is in trouble because of the spillover of because of the weakness of the SPLA, its inability to sustain itself within the borders of Sudan. I would like him to tell us, does he see any possibility that they will have some victory in sight, or are we going to be paying the price for their failure on the battleground for a long time to come?
Kano, the back is yours.
Well, with all due respect, what Honorable Winnie has just said is not true. The Uganda army does not accompany us. We don't need to be accompanied because we are not in Uganda. We are inside our borders. You can go anywhere in Uganda and find where there are SPLA camps. Absolutely, there are no SPLA camps in Uganda. It is not true that the Ugandan army backs up the SPLA. These are allegations, of course, that do come from Khartoum. From time to time, Uganda does send reconnaissance personnel to find out information about your own rebels inside our territory. If Uganda rebels leave our territory, there will be no reason for these reconnaissance teams to go and look for information. So it is not true that the Ugandan army backs up the SPLA and that the SPLA is pushed back to Gulu. This is absolutely not the case. There has been no situation where the SPLA was pushed into Uganda. On the contrary, it is the Sudan government army that gets pushed into Uganda. When we captured Kapoita in 1988, almost a whole brigade of the Sudanese army came into Uganda, led by a brigadier and 2 colonels.
Were they defecting?
They were being chased. And we stopped short of the Ugandan border. We did not enter Uganda in respect of international borders. Again, when we captured Torit in 1989, a whole force that was garrisoned in Torit entered Uganda. Similarly, when we captured Maridi, the 3,000 plus troops that were remnants of them that were in Maridi pushed into Zaire. So it is actually the Sudan government army that has the habit of becoming refugees inside Uganda and inside the neighboring countries. The same thing did happen in Kenya when we captured Kapoita. They did spill over into Kenya. With respect to what you call the weakness of the SPLA, I believe the SPLA is one of the strongest guerrilla armies on the continent. The war at the present extends from Numili on the Ugandan border all the way to the Red Sea, to Port Sudan. That's a distance of about 2,000 plus kilometers. So the frontage that the Sudan government has to face is that long. We are very deep inside our country. We have 6 fronts in the war, 3 in the south, that is one in Equatoria, the other one is in Bahr al-Ghazal, it has no borders with Uganda. The other one is in Upper Nile, it has no borders with Uganda. We are in central Sudan, that is in southern Kordofan. We are in southern Blue Nile. We are on the Eritrean border. The SPLA is facing a very determined enemy where the issue is not just that of management, but the issue is that of the definition of the Sudan itself. We have said that Sudan has been wrongly constituted in 1956, and that has been the reason for the 2 wars. I have said before that we have had 34 years of war, and that is the complexity of the Sudan. One of the false equations in the Sudan is that if you are a Muslim, you are an Arab. That misdefinition has to be has to be corrected, has to be broken, because not all Muslims are Arabs, and not all Arabs are Muslims for that matter. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. Its population is about the size of the Arab League, leave alone Turkey, Iran, the Muslims in Africa. So this equation is one of the problems we have in the Sudan. That is why we call for a new Sudanese political dispensation, a Sudanese political entity that transcends without necessarily negating our various backgrounds of race, of religion, of ethnicity, and so forth. The assurances to any minority, religious or ethnic, is to build a Sudan that belongs to all, and that does not marginalize anybody. In the Sudan, we have what we call marginalized peoples. That includes Southerners, it includes Nuba, it includes the Bija, the Ingassinas, even the Arabs themselves. There is a tribe that is called Ashaida, and this is an Arab tribe that lives along the Red Sea. In 1995, they came to me and they said, Dr. John, when you count marginalized peoples, you add us in, and they are an Arab tribe. And I said, what has marginalized you? I thought Sudan was an Arab country, and they said, no. In the Sudan, if you are too black, they call you Abid. That means slave. If you are too light, they call you Halabi. It is a derogatory word like gypsy. So he said in the Sudan, in order to belong to the ruling group, you got to be a bastard. You got to be a mixture. It's called Jana Haram in Arabic. So we are determined to create a new Sudan that belongs to all its peoples, and that is the only guarantee to anybody. Even women are marginalized, and I count them among the marginalized in the Sudan, because to give witness in court, you need 4 to 1. The witness of four women will be accepted as equivalent to the witness of 1 man.
That institutionalized.
Lots of Ugandans or Kenyans or Africans in general who drink the pombe would be marginalized in the Sudan, because drinking is not allowed. You get 50 lashes or 100 lashes, 300 lashes for drinking and becoming a little tipsy. I don't know how many Ugandans will be flogged.
This program will not be sponsored.
Exactly. Capital gang will not be sponsored in the Sudan. The relationships, your last remark, within the NIF, it is true that there are very serious tensions between Turabi, who is the Ayatollah of Sudan, is the religious leader, and Bashir. Bashir is nominally the president of the country. But Turabi, in the Islamic system, and last year they passed an Islamic constitution. In May 1998, Sudan formally became a theocratic state. And in a theocratic state, the spiritual leader and the temporal leader must be one person, the Imam, wields both spiritual and political authority. The anomaly in the Sudan is that you have 2 leaders, one for the temporal and one for the spiritual. This is because of the way the NIF came to power. They came to power in 1989 through a military coup. And they knew that the army they used to come to power was not an Islamist army. If you are going to have an Islamic state, then you must have an Islamic army, because the character of the army must be congruent with the character of the state. And they weren't in 1989. So you have had a protracted period of time where the NIF has been building its own army while destroying.
This is the Capital Gang, brought to you by Uganda's finest premium beer, Bell Lager.
91.3 Capital FM. This is the Capital Gang, brought to you by Bell Lager, the finest premium beer in the country, with the Honorable Winnie Byanyima, Frank Ketusibe, Charles Onyangobo, and Colonel John Garanga, biggest guerrilla chief in town. We are going to go through a series of questions because Colonel has to run to do what he knows best. But we shall, have questions from Winnie, Frank, and Charles. We'll start with you, Winnie.
Yes, I don't agree with you, Dr. Garang, that your movement doesn't enjoy military support from Uganda. I'm a slightly well-informed Ugandan. I've picked it up from your friends in some of the diplomatic missions here. I've picked it up from our own officers who are involved in operations to assist the SPLA. You do enjoy military and political support of Uganda, and I actually don't even object to that as such. But I take the position that since you enjoy that support and it costs Ugandans both money and lives, Ugandans should have an interest in knowing how you wage this war, how efficiently you wage this war, because they pay a price for it. So I'm interested to know, and in that respect, I would like you to answer this question. You say your front stretches from Equatoria to the Red Sea. That means that you cross over the Kenyan border as well, but Kenyans do not pay the price that we pay for supporting the SPLA. Maybe you might want to address that. Maybe you might tell us why on the border of Kenya and Sudan you don't have the situation you have on the border of Uganda and Sudan. You might want to go into that. But so as a Ugandan, I'm interested to know how efficiently you are waging this war so that that war is concluded as quickly as possible. War is not trial and error. It is a science. You plan it and you wage it. You must have a strategy that you work out and some realistic expectations of a resolution. So you ought not, we should not have to wait for indefinitely for the end of the armed conflict in Sudan. If you cannot realistically see a solution in that, then you ought to look for other options like negotiation and stop the war. However, I also want to know how democratic you are internally within the SPLA. Because if you want this new dispensation in Sudan, you want to end the Islamic fundamentalists there, what are you going to put there in place? Will it be a dictatorship of the liberators? And is that necessarily better than a law based on a religion, Islam? As you know, Islamic fundamentals may be distasteful to me as a Christian, but at least the majority Muslims perhaps can tolerate it because it's based on their faith. But then a dictatorship from military people who fought a war, guerrillas who fought a war, can be unpalatable to everybody. So what kind of internal democracy do you practice from which we can say that you are probably going to give the Sudanese a democracy if you have an opportunity to be in power? Are you elected, for example? Do you have internal elections in the movement? How many times have you been elected? Who is your electorate? Do you have women on your executives, in the top leadership? I'm interested in those questions.
Yes.
And I'm interested in knowing about Riek Machar, who left your movement and accused you of bad leadership. What do you have to say about what he said? And assure Ugandans that you have an organization that is democratic and that can give Sudan a democratic option in future.
Kano, I want to give you the last word on this one, so I want to take all the questions in one go, then you can, have a field day. So Frank, what's your take?
Actually, my take on this is linked to Winnie's and is linked to the new dispensation that the SPLA and NDA, okay, the NDA, shall we call it, wants to put in place in Sudan, because I think the NDA must give hope to the Sudanese people and to the Africans, Uganda, Congolese, Kenyans, and so Ethiopians and Eritreans, that this heart of Africa will turn the corner and get into some stable regime. And the biggest problem I have with SPLM has to do with the apparent lack of loyalty to the movement, or it could also be related to fatigue of people, high level officers within Sudan, who are continuously defecting from the SPLA, the Sudanese government. They flip-flop often between SPLA and Khartoum. It leaves me a bit uncomfortable when you hear that a person, when he has referred to Riek Machar,
And
when
Kerbin.
he was eventually, I think, killed. Obviously, he seemed to have been so disagreeable. Even his photo, he seems to have been murdered by one of his kind. But there are two problems there. To get people rising to such high positions, when the movement has not filtered them enough to ensure that they are solid, leaves me a bit uncomfortable. I know people do defect, they do get tired. I think we want some level of comfort that the top leadership of the movement has got a mechanism of choosing leaders who are best qualified.
Yeah. So Charles,
3 points very quickly. One is about NDA. There is, there are people who actually worry about the NDA in the sense that they think that let us use the parochial words that this is the Pan-Arabists have regrouped and they are basically trying to hijack the agenda, particularly the question of southern determination. And that actually for the SPLA to accept that was really to concede defeat. And that, that requires giving up a series of things. And, so how much is NDA representative of a shift of the political fortunes? And contrary to what you say, there are some people, particularly in the South, who actually see it as a defeat. And connected to that is this question, and you'll hear a lot of Ugandans say that they have a problem with the SPLA's, strategic outlook, that you are so fascinated by taking the towns and that, the SPLA, MLA lacks the strategic depth, actually, to organize, administer, and have a guerrilla force. And, you go for the towns, it's easy to take you out, and that's why you keep suffering these reverses. In fact, I've spoken to a number of Ugandan senior people who express a lot of frustration with the SPLA in that regard. And third, and connected to that, is this whole equation between Uganda and the SPLA. It factors in the question of the Lord Resistance Army. There is some information which suggests that there is a deal between us and the SPLA. We say we take care of you, and then you also take care of our interests. And one of them is to sort out Konyi and LRA. But there is the accusation that Dr. John keeps telling the boys, you go easy on the LRA, because if the LRA thing is solved, then it basically weakens your ability to call on we will not call you on the gang. So we want to be comfortable here that you are keeping your side of the bargain and you are not shortchanging us.
Doctor, it's your call now.
Well, those are quite a few questions with respect to Winnie's intervention. You may have your own sources of information about Uganda's military support for the SPLA, but
which I don't oppose, by the way.
I did not insinuate that, but I hold to my view that this is these are rumors, and
The word rumors has taken on a new meaning of it.
Doctor, let me advise you, that word has serious connotations in Uganda.
I just came from the bush.
We will excuse you.
If there are other connotations of the word, I'm using the word in its classical English. How efficiently are we fighting the war? And well, of course, Ugandans, Kenyans, Egyptians, Libyans, Africans in general would have an interest in our efficiency of fighting the war. But at the end of the day, we are accountable to the people of Sudan in terms of how we are fighting that war, and the people of the Sudan have confidence in us that we are handling the war in its strategic and tactical dimensions correctly, and that is why we are able to sustain a military front that is more than 2,000 kilometers. That points to efficiency rather than inefficiency for a guerrilla army to maintain that kind of frontage. Why there are no problems on the Kenyan border, in my view, is because Sudan, as of now, does not sponsor terrorist groups inside Kenya. It does sponsor a party called the Islamic Party of Kenya. But our information is that the IPK has some 500 trained guerrillas that are located in the Sudan, but that have not been unleashed. When they are unleashed, there will be problems in Kenya as well. It is the.
So I was suggesting that there isn't a problem because Kenya probably does not give you the military support that we give you. So they also find that they don't need a rebel group to counter.
No, first of all, there's been no history of insurgency in Kenya. You know, insurgency in Uganda did not begin with the LRA. There was no Idi Amin in Kenya. The history of Uganda is different from the history of Kenya. Secondly, Sudan does not support terrorist groups in an active military form in Kenya. They do in Eritrea, and so there is a problem inside Eritrea. They do in Ethiopia, and so there is problem inside Ethiopia. They do in Uganda, and so there is problem inside Uganda. The source of all these problems
all
is
three countries support you militarily. Eritrea, Ethiopia, Uganda.
That's your point of view again. Those are the rumors I was talking about before. But there are problems. You could say that it is because these countries support the SPLA, which is not true. There are problems in these countries because Sudan destabilizes these countries. This is not only these countries. There is no SPLA presence in Egypt. Yet, the regime in Khartoum attempted the assassination of President Mubarak in Addis Ababa. They also have destabilization activities in Libya. I was in both. I have been in Cairo and Tripoli several times.
And later South Africa.
And there is that problem. Yeah. So the problem is definitely the presence of an Islamic fundamentalist regime in Khartoum that sponsors terrorism in the region, not because there is an SPLA. The SPLA is older than most of these countries in terms of the war. The war started in 1955, before Uganda even became independent, before Kenya became independent. So it is the problem of a wrong political dispensation in the Sudan that is the problem. In terms of your second question, internal democracy within the SPLA, whether there are women in SPLA leadership, we have actually positive discrimination in favor of women in our liberation movement. Our National Liberation Council, that is the equivalent of our parliament, according to our law, must have a minimum of 22% women that are guaranteed seats in Parliament in the NLC, and then women contest for the remaining 78% on an equal basis with the men. This is because of the marginalization of women in the Sudan, and I have called before in our national convention that women are the marginalized of the marginalized.
Now you are talking.
Because we are all marginalized, but within that marginalization, women are even marginalized. So they have a double war to fight for themselves as women, and we are in solidarity with them in that respect. We have internal democracy. We have a national convention. The last one we held in 1994. One is due now. We hold it every 5 years. The second Congress will be held sometimes in June, after May.
Do they elect you?
Yes, they did. In the last national convention, I was elected along with the NLC members.
Do you have a term limit?
5 years.
Let's proceed,
So it will not be a replacement with the dictatorship of liberators. We could not be fighting in order to establish a new Sudanese political dispensation based on good governance, based on democracy, in order to establish another dictatorship. No, we are committed to democracy, and we are practicing that. From the village level, we have village liberation councils, we have Payam liberation councils, we have county liberation councils, we have regional liberation councils, and we have a national liberation council, which is our highest decision-making body. We have a national executive council, which is the equivalent of our executive. We are now putting in place an independent judiciary. We have just appointed a chief justice, Justice Ambrose Rain, to organize an independent judiciary. We have a high judicial council that will oversee that independent judiciary. So we are putting in place the three branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and an independent judiciary.
You need 22% women in the judiciary. Have justice for women.
And we will need to train them also.
Yeah.
We will have no problem with that. We are committed to full equality of women with our men folk. That's a commitment of the movement. With respect to Riek Machar and those who have defected from us, and this was also in Frank's question, I believe, or was it?
It was related.
Well, liberation movements are like that. People have differences of opinion. See, in any serious human effort, you see, take for example our Lord Jesus Christ. He had 12 apostles, you know, and one of them betrayed him. And
another one denied him.
And another one denied him 3 times. Take the Prophet Muhammad. He was driven out of his home in Mecca and went to Medina, and it is that escape which is called Hijriya, is what the Muslims now count thy dead. So this idea of
made your case.
this idea of betrayals is not SPLA specific. It is a human condition. We do our best to.
Even God couldn't solve it.
Yeah, point taken. Can we take on Charles's?
We do our best to solve those problems, and
human weakness.
And from the crisis that we had in the movement in 1991, as a result of those events, we held a national convention that again affirms our credentials as Democrats. We discussed very seriously the international, regional, and internal changes in the Sudan, and we rejuvenated the SPLA and built it up to what it is now. To the extent that it extends over a distance of 2,000 kilometers. We have established 3 fronts in the north, and that is a recovery from the problems we had in 1991. And that is the test of a liberation movement, its resilience. And we have been resilient, and will continue to be resilient until full democracy and a new Sudan are formed. Charles's question with respect to the NDA, And the worry that it is a pan-Arabist move to hijack the issue of self-determination. Yes, I have heard those fears, but they are unfounded. The argument by some of the Southerners is that why should we be in the NDA? Why should we fight in the North? And this is unscientific. Why should the war be confined to the South? Is the South the battleground? Sudan is one country. We are fighting to establish a new Sudanese political dispensation. In order to achieve that, you got to address the issue of the center of power. The center of power is in Khartoum. Unless you take the war to Khartoum, you cannot hope to establish an independent Southern Sudan with respect to Southern separatists. What constrains them from moving away, from becoming independent since Anyanya 1, is because central authority has not been dismantled. Without dismantling central authority, you cannot achieve an independent Southern Sudan for those who are fighting for an independent Southern Sudan. Now, our objectives are global. We say we fight for a one Sudan on a new basis. And in order to achieve even that, the government in Khartoum must be dismantled. Now, once it is dismantled, then you have all your options. You have the option of a new Sudan. You have the option of an independent Southern Sudan, and hence the issue of self-determination. The NDA has a minimum program. Its minimum program is the removal of the NIF regime in Khartoum. That is what glues us together. The crisis we have had recently, and that's why we are meeting in Kampala, is that there was an agreement signed in Djibouti by one of the members of the NDA that calls for reconciliation with the regime. Once you do that, you undermine the basis of the unity of the NDA itself, and this is what we came to correct. And so the NDA cannot be harmful to Southerners because it enables the war to be fought in the North. And if you do not fight in the North, you cannot possibly achieve independence if it is independence Southerners want. There are Southerners who disagree with our strategic overview, articulating our objectives in globalist terms, and thereby not denying ourselves allies in the North. You see, when you say you are fighting for an independent Southern Sudan, you do a lot of disservice to yourself. You forestall the option of having allies in the North. You de facto unite the North, that they are one group that must be fought. And why do you want to fight a bigger enemy? United by your own definition of who the enemy is. You unite the Arab world, you unite the Islamic world, and you denied yourself the option of playing a role at the center. We are now, as the SPLM, SPLA, playing a role in the center. The option of a new Sudan is there. It is preferable. I would rather belong to a bigger entity in which I'm equal with others than to a smaller entity.
Were you on top? Where you on top?
No. Where I am on an equal basis. I thought I underlined that.
Yes.
And so the NDA is a useful mechanism that can lead us either to a new Sudan in which we have equality for all Sudanese, or which can facilitate self-determination. Because self-determination can only come as a result of the system in Khartoum being forced to accept that. But these Southerners who argue this try to delink the war from self-determination. That self-determination can be achieved in spite of the war. This is false. And that's the mistake Riek Machar did. He put himself on the receiving end, that I want an independent Southern Sudan. Once you say that, you acknowledge a master that gives you self-determination. And self-determination, by definition, must be organic to the self. It is the self that is determining itself. But when Bashir says, come, I'll give you self-determination, this is a contradiction in terms. Self-determination cannot be given and it remains self-determination. It becomes derivative, derived from Bashir. And that's exactly what happened with the Addis Ababa agreement. When it was given by the North, it was taken by Numeri. So the Lord giveth.
So can't it be negotiated?
The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh. And in this case, the Lord is the North.
Are you saying it must be taken militarily? Can't it be negotiated?
It can be negotiated and it can be taken by negotiations. What I object to is the giving part.
If it's negotiated, there's a give and take.
Yeah,
Like in South Africa, for example, I gave an example of South Africa before that apartheid was negotiated out of power. And so we allow for that option. And that's why we are in IGAD. That's why we went to Abuja. So yes, it can be negotiated, and the apartheid system in the Sudan can be negotiated out of power.
91.3 Capital FM. This is the Capital Gang. This is the only place where you find such explosion. The program is brought to you by Bell Lager. Doctor, let me tell you that this is the finest premium beer in Kampala, and we hope that when you liberate, we shall be able to...
I didn't see it here.
Louis Jones, make sure Kano, Louis Jones, you're out there. Sanda Walisimbi, can you deliver a crate of the finest premium beer to Kano John Garang? He hasn't tasted. Maybe we'll create a market for Bell Lager in Khartoum once Sudan is liberated.
And I don't subscribe to Sharia.
Kano, we thank you very much for taking your time off to come and join us. We obviously will stay here to go on for another about 10 minutes on another Kano who is of great interest to us. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you for meeting Honorable Winnie Byanyima, Franca Tusime, and Charles Onyango Bo, who are known as the movers and shakers of this country. And we hope that one day...
What is this?
Please give my greetings to Mansour Khalid.
He's here.
Yes, give him my greetings. I know him from a long time back.
I'm going to meet him now.
And Kano, I look forward to the day I'll be able to come back to Khartoum. My father was expelled from there. I was given 48 hours to leave. So as we stand now, our family is banned from entering Sudan. But I hope that you'll be able to invite me back.
From entering Khartoum, Sudan.
Yes.
You can enter our Sudan, yes.
But as you go out, Kano, I'm going to play.